All right, so part two of a four-part series. The first part we touched on a lot of the chassis and drivetrain components, a lot of the toughs, if you remember, tough ply, tough pex, tough coat. We're gonna blast right into segment two here, part two, with some of the things you can see when the coach is completed, but you may not know how they go together, why we do things certain ways, what's the purpose of that, why did you put this there, why did you put this here, things like that. So the first thing I wanna touch on is another one of those industry standard type components, and that goes down to the luggage bays that are put on the outside of the coach. You may open up a luggage door and you look on the inside and you see this carpeted or fabric material. That's typically called ozite. We don't use a lot of that on the outside. It's more mainly used for inside for cabinet liners and things like that. But industry standard is to experiment with those on the outside of the coach because it's efficient, it's less costly, it goes together better, they can put the seams and stuff like that. What we do here is we'll focus on the rotocast components. So rotocast is kind of like a spun system. It's a composite material put in a mold and spun to get all the air bubbles out to create a feature such as you see here. So it's a solid on the outside. It has ridges on the inside. You can come on around. This coach is still obviously in production. There's no house up here, so we're going to see shavings and things like that that will eventually be cleaned out. But it's a nice thick material. There are typically three grades of the rotocast. There's a good, better, best, like there is in most pieces and parts that anybody would use. In here we do use the best system, so it's the thickest material. So let's just say you happen to have something kick up from the road, you catch a chunk of wood in the road or something like that. If it was a thin metal barrier with some ozite liner on there, you could potentially have something go right through your compartment, or worse yet, you'd have all your stuff in your compartment fall out. This stuff is very rugged, very durable. It is used in a lot of applications. One of the applications is probably the most famous is they'll use it in the military when they do drops. They'll build those containers out of a rotocast type material. So something falling from an airplane with pieces and parts on the inside landing. We're not quite going through those kind of rigors in an RV, but you will have the peace of mind to know that these things can withstand a lot. So rotocast components is a great place to go. Something else to talk about are holding tanks. Those are also made of a similar material. Back here we have our freshwater tank. And if you look, this freshwater tank, like in most Class C applications, is exposed. It's exposed to the elements. And a lot of times the great part about an RV, especially a Class C, is the flexibility and the fun you can have by going any place at any given point in time. So how do we prevent that water in a colder climate? Let's just say you want to take a weekend and go to the mountains and do a ski trip. Well, we actually put a holding tank heating pad on the bottom of that. It's kind of tough to see here, but I believe we will get a shot of that from the bottom side of the coach, and you'll see that it has a pad on the bottom. It's hooked up to electricity. It has heat provided to it, so it keeps that water from freezing. So that's a great feature in itself. Hey, so we were very fortunate. We've actually found the next coach in line. Doesn't have the floor set yet on there, so we actually have better access to that holding tank, and we can show you what that heating pad looks like. Again, that'll keep your water from freezing. Make sure that heating tank's on if you're in cold climates. It just kind of protects the water inside the tank. Remember, you do have that PEX tubing all throughout the coach, which is going to prevent a lot of water from freezing. If it were to get cold, if it were to freeze, it does have the capacity to expand and contract. So all those components should be good. Another thing you wouldn't be able to see necessarily from the outside of the coach unless you just see that nozzle and it says black tank Santa flush or black tank flush on there. You kind of wonder where that goes or what that does. So our black tank is located here, and you'll see this going in, this wire going in, or this line going in. It's actually routed to the other side where we're going to have that inlet on the outside of the coach. But what it does, it goes in and it sprays through here. So your black tank is pitched towards the driver's side of the coach, or in the industrial, we call that road side of the coach. That's where your knife valves are going to be when you pull those to evacuate your tanks. So when you put the hose on the outside to spray water in here, it sprays inside that tank to flush out any debris that may be left over after the final drain has been taken care of. Something else to touch on is we all know that most of these Class Cs have a generator, anywhere from a 4.0 Onan to a 5.5 Onan if you get the dual roof AC option. The brand is probably more important. It's Onan, it's Cummins, it's well known, it's worldwide. They've provided the RV industry generators for years and years and years, and one way to detect if you have an Onan generator is, one is the word on the side of it, but also two, if you open up that luggage door and you see that green generator, which is, we actually have one sitting right here getting ready to go in this coach. This is actually going to be a 5.5, so it'll be the larger one. The standard on the Class Cs are the 4 with the single roof air. The optional is the 5.5 with a dual roof air. Another great feature that we put in these Class Cs, something you may not find is that industry standard as you start looking around and doing your research when it comes to buying your Class C. So another feature that you may kind of just take for granted if the coach that you've purchased has the optional leveling jacks is it's a feature that has a brain located centrally in the coach that tells it if it's level or not, front to rear, side to side. And we offer a 4-point leveling system. So you'll see that those levelers get attached right into a heavy duty bracket that's attached right into that C-channel rail that comes from Ford. So when you have 4 of these, one on each point, one on each main point, they operate at different levels to make sure that you can level the coach up for better performance and you don't feel like you're always walking downhill. They are automatic, and they also have a manual feature. So if you wanted to tip one up to get the water to run off the condensation off your air conditioner, something to run off the back of the coach, you can do that. But it's one of those things that you may notice you have. You may see a leveler go down, but you've never seen how it's installed. And that's just another feature we want to be able to show you here. We have a couple more in this segment. We're going to move up to the next unit. Be right back with you. So we're down to 3 in this segment. 3 things I want to make sure that you are aware that are on this unit, that you understand kind of how it works or what it does, and then I visually want you to see where these components go and what they do. So we were fortunate enough to find a 1,000-watt inverter. It's on the bench here getting ready to be installed in the next unit. So what does an inverter do? An inverter actually takes your 12-volt battery power from your 6-volt deep cycle batteries, which we put a pair of those in there to create a 12-volt circuit. What that'll do is it'll take that 12-volt power and it'll invert it into 110 power like you'd use in your house. So for your refrigerator, any kind of outlets you plug stuff into, chargers, or for your phone or your tablet, things like that that require 110, this is the guy that does it. So you typically have 3 forms of power sources for 110 in an RV. One is the shore power. Now, industry standard in a Class C motorhome is to provide you with 30 amp service. 30 amp service can run a roof air and maybe a few other smaller components, but it tends to drag down when you have an air conditioner going, you fire up the microwave, you got a couple of lights on, some things are plugged in. 30 amps not the best, and most campgrounds have actually gone away from 30 and actually gone to 50. So if your unit has a 30 amp power source, you're going to have to put a pigtail on there to plug in at the campground to drag your power down. Just the opposite on ours. So since we're not necessarily industry standard, we're going to get you 50 amp service out of the gate. So the 50 amp service coming into the house, teamed up with the 1,000-watt inverter, are going to provide you with great power sources. And then we already touched on the fact that your other power sources are going to be your 4,000-watt or your 5,500-watt Onan gas quiet generator. So there's your 3 types of power. Something else we want to touch on is very, very important is we're using a tankless water heater in the Class C instead of a tank version. Industry standard is to provide a 6-gallon tank water heater that continually has to run when there's demand to heat the water up inside that 6-gallon tank. And once that water is depleted, it takes a while to recover. On a tankless water heater, it's very similar to a residential system. The water actually flows in copper coils around the burner to have continuous hot water. If you're hooked to city water at the campground or at your house, you can have continuous hot water. Leave your faucet on as long as you want to. You can leave your shower run as long as you want to. You're not going to run out of hot water, as long as you're not overfilling your tank, or if you're hooked to your to your main water tank, you could potentially run out if you leave it run too long. But if you're at a resort or a campsite that has sewer and water hookups, your flexibility greatly increases on what you're able to do. We do have a couple pictures or a couple places in which we could see a water heater, but if you want more information, you can always jump on our website. You can always jump on, and Google tankless water heater and kind of figure out the ins and the outs of that. And then one last thing, I wanted to show you the bottom side of the slide out room. Industry standard is to put what they call a Darko liner. It's like a fabric-y type material on the bottom of the slide bottoms. Well, those slide bottoms go in and out every time you run the room, either extend or retract. And there's always a certain level of abrasion. So what we actually do is we do what we call an enduro liner. It's a fiberglass composite that goes on the bottom of that belly to provide you with the best resistance, the best rugged and durable surface that we possibly can, and get away from that fabric which can tear. You can rip it, starts to fray and hang down over time. And fabric is just not meant to be outside. Fiberglass, again, is meant to be outside. It's very good. We call it enduro liner. So our next stop and our last stop in this segment will be right down there. Okay, so I found a motorhome in production that has a slide room extended so we can get a peek underneath at that enduro liner I was talking about. Keep in mind, it's a fiberglass composite, so it's going to be durable enough to withstand the elements on the outside of the coach and not going to be putting you in a position where you have to be concerned with that dark oak underbelly, fabric tearing or ripping or anything like that as that room goes in and out. So take a quick peek underneath there, and this will be wrapping up for our next segment. All right, we'll see you soon. Hey, as you can see behind me and to the side and to this side, we're getting pretty close to making this motorhome come to life. We've touched on the chassis, the platform, all the components you necessarily can't see while the coach is being built. We're starting to get a floor on here. Our surfaces are on. You can still see behind me we have some other components that obviously haven't gone in yet, but we're really getting close. We have about 20 things left, so 2 more segments, part 3 and part 4, and we're going to get out of the manufacturing facility. We've got a couple finished pieces across town. We're going to track those down, and we'll call this a wrap at the manufacturing facility, and we'll see you across town.